My understanding is that we will be hopefully forming a quorum. We expect Councilmember Tom Labange any moment now, and Councilmember Garcetti as well. He's running a little late. But we usually give our professors 15 minutes, and look, the professor just walked in. All right. Our Council President Garcetti is joining us. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I never want to say this will be a quick agenda because that's when I jinx it, so I'm not going to say that.
Some 20 comment cards coming.
I know as they flood in. But we do have two items, and they're very important items. And I'm going to ask the CLA to give us subject number one.
Sure. Item number one, a report from the Bureau of Engineering on the establishment of a Los Angeles River Special Projects Office, from the City Planning Department on the implementation of the Los Angeles River Revitalization Master Plan, and from the Community Redevelopment Agency on the proposed Los Angeles River Revitalization Corporation.
Come on up, folks. Welcome, Mr. Moore.
Good afternoon. Gary Moore with the Bureau of Engineering. Great to be here to tell you about some of the highlights from May and June. We've been meeting with the county on a regular basis to implement the Memorandum of Understanding between the city and the county. We've made a lot of great progress, and we're anticipating to be here in the fall with the draft agreement for the City Council's approval. We are going to, at our next meeting with the county on July 30th, the sister document that will be going with that is called the River Master Use Agreement, and we're going to start working on the substance of that document. Some of the key items with that will include the maintenance and security issues along the right-of-way. So we're continuing to make good progress, we believe, on that. The River Foundation, we had a really great meeting, and I want to thank Councilman Reyes for attending and staying the entire meeting with us, and it was just great to have you there because it really meant a lot to the community stakeholders, your presence. And that was on June 11th at the Audubon Center in Debs Park, which if anybody hasn't been there, it's a spectacular place to go. And I've been there a few times, and it's very, very nice. We're in the process right now of finalizing the draft report, and we'll be coming forward with you and on that. And there may or may not be one more meeting. We're still in.
And I want to first thank yourself and your staff. And Councilman Garcia said the day was really structured about hearing from the philanthropic and the nonprofit sector as to what they see. We really created a place for them at the table where we want to learn from them what kind of a river foundation should evolve, what should be included, how to look at these parameters that creates inclusivity, strengthens our leveraging capacity with our limited dollars, and just looked at the whole notion of how we build up a partnership in the philanthropic world, knowing all these social and monetary issues that are pressing upon us. And so I appreciate the tact that was used, the approach, and we're hoping to get the kind of feedback that creates a foundation that really hits all of the priorities of our respective districts throughout the corridor. So you guys did a great job structuring it that way. I think that was excellent.
Yeah, they were just fantastic with their time and their openness and really helping us. I echo what the councilman said. Regarding the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Ecosystem Restoration Feasibility Study, budget woes have hit the federal government like they've hit us, and that the Army Corps has told us that federal funding received for continuation of the study is not enough to complete this phase, and most likely there'll be a delay unless there's additional budget money. So we're continuing to work with the Army Corps on this. One note of, I guess there's a lot of, I always like to, a lot of hope here is that the Office of Management and Budget from the President's Office is coming to Los Angeles here, and they'll be coming on Friday, August 1st, and we just notified your staffs of this. And once again, there's an excellent opportunity to educate them about this fantastic revitalization master plan and what's going on here in Los Angeles. So we'll be working with your offices to if some availability to reach out to.
So elected officials are bringing their best dancing shoes, right?
Yes,
Great.
Please do.
We've just been joined by Councilmember Jose Huizar. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Good to have you. Good to have you. Mr. Moore had just gone through some of the issues regarding Bureau of Engineering and touched on the accomplishments. And keep going, Mr. Moore.
Just a couple. Money is always, like I say, a very important thing. We're very fortunate with the support of the council and the mayor to receive a couple of grants. And on June 23rd, the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy Board of Directors awarded $1.35 million, that's $1,350,000 in Proposition 84 funds for the Sunny Neck Park. And that's in Council District Number 4, Councilman Labange's district. We just really thank the council for their great partnership and teamwork on helping us on this. Along with that, on June 25th, the State Resources Agency awarded $2 million in Proposition 50 funds to the North Atwater Park expansion. And once again, this is a direct result, we believe, of the city and the county working together and the Corps to letting everybody know that the master plan, every dollar is going to make a change.
Great.
Two last items I just want to
Just give a shout out to Mitch O'Farrell. Thanks for your good work on the Sunny Nook Park as well. Thank you.
Right.
Yes.
Hey, look at hey, got applause.
Yes. That's the key. Councilman Garcetti, you're so right. I mean, there is just so many people pulling on the rope for everywhere now, and they know about this, and we really can't thank everybody enough for their pulling on the rope together. When the mayor went to Israel, he was able to sign a sister river agreement between for the Los Angeles River and the Yarkon River in Tel Aviv. So once again, the river continues to get international recognition, and I think it just continues to draw upon everywhere that we're going to revitalize, and we're in the middle of revitalizing the river. And lastly, I'd like to close on another award. The American Institute of Architects California Council selected the Los Angeles River Revitalization Master Plan to receive an honor award for urban design.
Wow.
So continues
Good job.
to be recognized. So thank you.
Beautiful. And before you leave, I do have a couple of report backs, if you can, for September, and I'm looking for your recommendations on how to address these following issues. You know, fishing and boating has become a very much more, I mean, it's a dramatic upturn in how many people, now they believe there's a river, and then they go down and they wow, there is a river. They do the things that people do with rivers. They fish and they boat. And I want to commend Councilman Garcetti's office. They've been trying to get some writing on paper as to what are our regulatory issues like, and they've been able to cite some and try to protect folks from getting hurt and making sure they're following the rules. But we need to figure out, instead of in a case by case, have a more uniform sense of uniformity as to how we're going to be dealing with this. So what policies are actually in place? Because I know there's I think Councilman Garcetti cited a Rec and Parks regulatory item that was used to deal with some issues. But how are we handling this? I mean, is it going to be on a council-by-council basis? I mean, we need to start thinking about systems and being consistent and how we look, because every part of the river changes. There's certain places that are very different than others. And so how is that policy going to be interpreted? I think is going to be key. So, and who should handle these items? Like, where should it go? I mean, is there a central place? Do we make it part of another department? What is it that we need? What we need to do, and just kind of let's take a peek at that and see if we can make some recommendations on that. And how do we make sure that we are monitoring all the efforts in the river programs and the events? Like, different parts of the river are going to be engaged for different levels of activity. So who's monitoring that and dealing with impact and everything that goes under that umbrella? Safety issues, policing issues, parking issues. I mean, everything that comes with that. And that's just the whole monitoring side of it. I mean, is anyone keeping track of that? And what's the level of activity that's occurring? But if you can get back to us on those two items, we would appreciate, hopefully, support our council colleagues as we go through this process. Any other questions for our river engineer? Okay. Okay, well, thank you, Gary.
Thanks.
All right. And next, please, we have our planning department, and come on in. Come on up, both of you. There's room for both of you guys. Come on up. Oh, there was.
What?
Introduce yourselves, folks. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Claire Bowen, the Planning Department, and
Hello, Deborah Kayan, Planning Department.
just just wanted to give you a brief update on the specific plan and the Rio. We started the, we've been
There's a
working
third
on the
chair.
Cornfield Arroyo Seco
Well,
specific
make sure
plan.
we're being inclusive in this process.
And actually, I'm going to get Noon up here in a minute, too, so we're going to have another department here. So
Okay.
anyway, we've been reporting the last few months on the Cornfields Arroyo Seco specific plan, and I'm just delighted to let you know that the consultant who was selected to assist us with that, helping us doing some sustainability enhancements, and who will be doing the EIR, started today, and they'll be joining us in town tomorrow for a meeting with the state parks and their consultant to start to really move forward on that plan. So I think that's going to be really a help for moving us forward. But I also wanted to just invite Nuna from the Environmental Affairs Department up just for a brief moment to talk about a grant that they received from the EPA that's going to help us look at brownfields in the specific plan area. So
Great.
departments coordinating together to really leverage monies to be more productive.
Hi, good afternoon.
Nuna Sebastian, Environmental Affairs Department.
Can you talk a little about the grant?
Yes.
Well, we just got a word from EPA to conduct a petroleum assessment wide area and sustainability focus area. So we're hoping we'll be collaborative with the planning department. I didn't have to repeat all that, did I?
No. Good.
And we're planning on assessing about 80 sites in the area to conduct like a mini phase ones, if you're familiar with EASs are. It will be.
Can you just break down that acronym for folks who don't know what that means?
Regulatory databases, research, extensive research, perhaps preparing GIS database based on the findings, and then based on that survey, we'll narrow down few sites for phase 2 assessments, which will be soil sampling, drilling, geophysical investigation, hopefully for the sites that will have high potential for revitalization in the area.
I mean, this is particularly important since obviously most of the land in the specific plan is been industrially zoned or is also owned by the city. So this will really allow us to really evaluate which properties really are suited to change in terms of whether we would allow to be a park space or allow them for residential.
Which one's needed the most?
That's right.
Right.
And then really what the cost would be, for doing the cleanup if we have to do that and start to look at what kind of dollars are available for that. So this is a really
That will be part of it as well, yeah.
So mechanically, you'll be drilling holes. You'll have machinery out there, and
Not at first.
No?
At first, we'll do just survey. Like I said, there will be research of
just titles. And
titles,
Okay.
Databases, and see what are potentially contaminated sites are, and then we'll narrow down to few, perhaps. Yeah.
That's 80 sites.
80 sites just for the survey, and they're thinking about 5 or 6.
And to what degree will the master plan
Okay.
play a role in your decision making for the 80 sites?
Pardon?
The master plan, the
Mhm.
river master plan. To what degree will that play a role in your decision making?
We have to work together. I assume this is an important part to coordinate our efforts,
Well,
so we won't duplicate.
And I know it's important, but
Right.
sometimes we have departments that get grants and they have their own focus as to what they want to do, and other departments are doing other
No,
things.
that's why
it's hard to get them
we're
to combine.
stressing it, to do
Well,
it together,
so
not
there's gonna be a
to
fact about that.
duplicate the effort.
Well, and specifically the site area they got funds to do is specifically the specific plan area. So those 80 are within that specific plan area. And so we'll certainly work with your staff to identify, and with our consultant
Great.
as well, which makes most sense of which of the 80 sites we think are most apt for redevelopment, so where do we want to study, and then look together to which to drill, in terms of drilling down to which of the 5 or 6 sites.
So if Councilman Wisar or Councilman Perry have sites that they are very interested in, and it falls in that 80, those could be viewed as priorities, maybe?
Definitely.
Okay,
Those are
good.
the factors we should, count on
All right,
in selecting it.
great. That's a great resource.
Mm-hmm.
And how much is the grant, may I ask?
200,000.
200,000. Okay,
Correct.
good. So the river keeps bringing in more money.
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. All right. Anything else from planning?
Do you want anything? I want to have Deborah Cahan just come up and just briefly just give you an
Any
update on
questions
where
from
we
my
are
colleagues
with the
for planning? No?
No, just that for the community meetings, please keep my office informed about the specific plan, any community meetings on the specific plan, so that we could advertise and publicize them as much as possible.
Absolutely appreciate that, because you guys are immediately adjacent to it, as is your district as well, Councilman Garcetti. Guys.
A brief update on the LA Rio. We've been continuing to update the MND to reflect comments that we've heard from the community. We've also been working on the actual document itself. The structure has remained largely the same. Some details have changed, and we've been working with other departments to expand on requirements that we've already placed inside the LA Rio. For example, making the specifications more specific for the applicant.
How many projects in general do you see in the horizon coming forward in the Rio? Is there a number you can point to?
It's really going to depend on the marketplace. We're seeing certainly a slowing down. We really haven't been seeing that many projects come forth to us lately.
So give me a ballpark number in general, just up to date.
20 to 100 every year. I mean, I think it's going to really vary. I mean, it could be thousands. I mean, I just think it's really going to depend on the marketplace. There's obviously
No,
thousands
I know
and
what
thousands
could
of
happen.
projects.
I'm asking to date, since you've been working on the Rio,
As
how many projects have you reviewed up to date?
I would say we get maybe 1 or 2 a month that we clear based off of the ZI that we currently have that reflects the boundaries of the LA Rio.
So it's not like hundreds. Because we get folks that come to the council during public hearing and make comments as if there's this big tsunami of projects that's wiping out houses and commercial, and it's blighting the area, and we're pushing people away and losing their homes because of this effort. And we're getting 1 or 2 a month that you review that passes the test that speaks to a riverfront district. 1 or 2 a month. Okay. Just for the record, I want to make sure that's clear. Because it gets some anxiety out there, and people don't really know what's going on out there. Okay, great. Any questions from our class? No?
Great. Turning it over
Okay.
to our CRA family here.
Sir, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Jason Neville. I'm with the Community Redevelopment Agency, and our update is quite short. It's similar to what was last ad hoc committee meeting, which is that the CRA continues to work with legal counsel on the Articles of Incorporation and bylaws for the River Revitalization Corporation. And we've also been working with other departments in the city family and Tetra Tech consulting firm on compiling a list of potential parcels that might be of interest to the River Revitalization Corporation along the river. Most of those are publicly owned or parking lots adjacent to the river and that sort of thing. It doesn't constitute any specific thing right now. It's just a list of potential sites that the staff of the River Corporation might want to look into for assemblage for parks, open space, and so forth adjacent to the river.
Fantastic.
And that's a list of about 165 potential sites that we've asked council offices and other city family to submit to us. So we're just in the process of compiling other stakeholders along the river. So that's not CRA's agenda. It's just what other people are saying they might want to look at.
So there's capacity for open space and...
Exactly.
Okay, great.
Developable sites.
That's good. That's good.
Update.
That's good that we're getting some kind of a skeleton out there. Fantastic. Any other questions? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. We do have one card on this one. Ms. Connie Elliott, very timely. Thank you, sir. How do you do? Welcome.
Hi, Connie Elliott. I'm on the board of the Studio City Residents Association. I also live next to the LA River, so I'm always interested in what's happening. But I just wanted to make a comment on this 1 or 2 projects thing. That seems to be what I keep hearing, not just in connection with the river. I just keep hearing that developers aren't applying to do projects right now. So I just wanted to throw that in. It seems like every meeting I go to, everything is slowed down. And I have a building near me that has been open, I think, for about a year, but isn't full. So I think that's why
What type of building is it?
It was approved to be a condo, but then because of the market, they went into an apartment building, upscale.
Okay.
And but it's right next to the river,
Right.
as it happens. But anyway, I just think that it, as she said, it is the economy
Right.
that accounts for the number of lack of number of projects.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that takes care of item number 1. I saw no questions from my colleagues, and let's move to item number 2.
Item number 2 is a verbal status report from the Bureau of Sanitation in response to motion Reyes Garcetti Gruel relative to the consequences of the U.S. Army Corps' determination of traditional navigable waterways as it impacts the Los Angeles River.
Okay, so we have the Bureau's verbal. Hi. We have with us our commissioner, Ms. Paula Daniels.
Hi.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Paula Daniels, Commissioner with the Board of Public Works.
Great.
Good afternoon, Shwaram Karagani, Bureau of Sanitation.
Okay, you can start any way you like.
Councilmember, in the last ad hoc committee, you requested us to provide a report back to you regarding the Corps of Engineer determination on the Los Angeles River, that which part of it is navigable or not. As you know, there are two segments that have been identified. We have a draft report that we are working with our other departments.
Put your microphone a little bit closer to you.
We have a draft report that currently we are finalizing for our next LA ad hoc committee. But just the main highlights of the report is that the LA River itself, the main stem, based on our interpretation of the law, and I'm not an attorney by any means, will not
One
be
degree you don't have.
will not be impacted. But the tributaries is what we are concerned about as far as the ecosystem and aquatic life and stream protection and other issues. So we are concerned about that. And as you also may know, the Supreme Court case, there are two polarity opinions by Justice Kennedy that says it should have a significant nexus to traditional, navigable water for something to be called waters of United States. And Justice Stevens talks about hydraulic connectivity, and the Justice Scalia is the only one that talks about permanently flowing or not permanently flowing. And my understanding is that all the court cases so far, they all have used, Justice Kennedy and Justice Stevens as the more conservative, way of defining waters of United States. Last but not least, as you also may know, there is a HR 2421 by Oberstar and Feingold that is currently in the Congress, and the Senate bill is 1870. They are going to remove the word navigable from the definition, so everything becomes United States waters. Last but not least, in any case, if the tributaries are not under the 404, what we call 404 jurisdictional of the Corps of Engineers, then obviously the state of California has a number of water quality and regulations that would apply, and those would come in the terms of what we call water discharge requirement, and also both fish and game basin plan. All of those still would apply. But I'm hoping that, from what I understand, in the next few weeks, some of the cases before the Corps of Engineers, now that they have heard our opinion, they would go ahead and make the, in my opinion, right determination regarding, Glendale Narrows and other locations within the LA River. Because I said it last time, I say it right now, from engineering perspective, if the Pacific Ocean is the United States water, from my perspective, it should not be hard illegally to make the argument that things that are tributary to the ocean would also be navigable waters. But that's my technical opinion, not legal.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Commissioner.
good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to let you know some of what has been going on with respect to this decision by the Army Corps, which I do find problematic. And there's a number of legal reasons why, but essentially the impact of the decision could be quite significant in terms of later determinations it would make relative to tributaries and streams, as Shahram has pointed out. We would still be under regulatory compulsion by the state and other aspects of the Federal Clean Water Act to do our part as a municipality in complying with regulations and TMDLs. But the potential is that there would be a loss of federal protection to an individual property development around tributaries and streams. The 404 permits that the Army issues may not be something they would have to issue, and therefore that loss of protection is a significant impact. While there may be other layers of regulation, that loss is significant. So as a result, I've written to the EPA asking them to conduct a special case review. They're authorized to do this because they are essentially the lead agency to make these determinations, and they're operating under a joint agreement, a memorandum of agreement with the Army Corps, and there's a number of other reasons why they have the authority to do that. But it seemed appropriate this time that they do so because our understanding is there are about 400 permits pending in the LA River watershed. So if the Army Corps makes decisions that on a case-by-case that we don't necessarily agree with, that's a that's quite a nightmare trying to address all of those administratively, but also the impacts are significant. So rather than wait to see what happens case by case by case, it seemed appropriate to have the EPA take a look at it now. And we mean no disrespect to the Army Corps. We're going to respectfully agree to disagree with their interpretation of the recent Supreme Court law and the guidance following that. But ask for the EPA that does have a final authority to do this to take a look. And just for your information, the Assembly has also taken up a resolution. They'll be hearing it tomorrow morning by Assemblymember Julia Brownlee to do the same thing, asking that the EPA conduct a special case review. And it's my understanding the congressional delegation, including members Waxman and Sherman, are looking at this as well.
Great. I think we all want the same thing in terms of seeing how we protect the watershed and with all its complexities as we try to find ways to bring the river back to life. But I also want to provide a kind of flexibility, if you will, for the Army Corps so that they can show us what they mean. I don't believe we've had enough cases in front of us or decisions made that will tell us what direction they're going in. But I appreciate your effort because you're looking at it from a bigger picture point of view in terms of a regional network.
The whole watershed.
Of the whole watersheds. And that goes beyond LA County. It goes into other areas as well, I imagine.
It certainly goes beyond the boundaries of the city, but to the extent that those tributaries and streams drain into the river, it's going to impact the areas over which we have jurisdiction. And ultimately, it all impacts the ocean, which is something that we all care quite a bit about.
Exactly. Any questions for our commissioner? Or
Just, are we coordinating then with any of the downstream cities on looking at this?
We have not officially coordinated with them, but
We may want to. I mean, obviously they have a stake, and they're absolutely in what the Corps was saying last time are already kind of traditionally navigable areas. It sounded like, and I do want to thank the Corps for what they said about this clearly being navigable, traditionally navigable and navigable. There's some protections, and they do everything to protect. We're just trying to give you the tools to protect all aspects of some of the parts that are leading in as well as the river itself. But it may. We may have counterparts in the county or in some of the small cities that would have as much, if not more, of a stake in this as well.
They may be holding their breath, but I think at this point it's worth taking action. I agree with you.
Yeah, and as I believe we move forward in the spirit of partnership, I'd like to ask if we can have our. Do you have questions, sir?
Yes, if you
please.
don't mind. Of the 400 permits you mentioned, what happens until we determine or figure this issue out? Do they get delayed, or are those projects going to get delayed?
Yeah, my
moving
understanding.
forward as of what, I mean, under what interpretation?
My understanding is the Army Corps is going to proceed with those under the interpretation they've issued. In the best case scenario, perhaps they interpret it in a way that's protective. But it seems from the reading of the determination they issued in June 4 that it's unlikely. So they will proceed on a case-by-case basis and make their determinations. Anybody who's opposed to their determinations would have an immediate right of appeal to the EPA.
Okay, so there's no stay on those permit applications.
Correct.
They're moving forward, right?
Right.
And what's the likelihood of federal legislation related to redefining what the different types of waterways qualify for regulation? What do you think is the likelihood for that passing?
Good question. I think it's unlikely that it'll pass this year, which is in part why I think there's some urgency to have it dealt with administratively as soon as possible.
Okay.
It is. I think it's a 2-year bill, the HR 2421 that Sharon mentioned.
2-year bill. So
yeah, and this is the last year of it. But so we're hopeful that there will be action taken. It's my understanding that the Democrats are all supporting it, but the prognosis is.
Yeah,
I
have the same problem trying to figure out how my colleagues are going to vote, so I can imagine a bigger.
We have been joined by Councilor Tom Labange.
Good afternoon.
We're on our second item, and we just finished discussing some of the impacts of the Army Corps' decisions and their approach on this whole issue of navigability and the concerns that have been raised by the Commissioner and concerns that are a verbal report being presented by Bureau of Sanitation. We'll get a written report for our next meeting. I did want to ask if we can have come to the table David Castañon, He's coming up. He is the chief of the regulatory affairs, and I'm hoping he'll give us an update or an insight as to where you're at. And I'm just curious. You have one heck of. You get increased staff for the 400 cases?
No, we didn't.
I
We
mean-
got no more money, but they did lower our performance standards a little bit for the year to account for the
But
workload.
how many cases do you actually have that's directly connected to the river or within the city boundaries? Is there a number?
Well, the number 400 has been put out there, but that's not accurate. For the LA River watershed, we only have 10 pending jurisdictional determinations at this point in time. The 400 that we have are for the whole district, the LA district.
What does
All-
that cover?
Oh.
All of Southern California, from the Mexican border up
That's my
to
understanding.
the Monterey County line, up to Mono Lake, and all of Arizona.
So how many states is that?
2 states.
2 states. Wide region in the Southwest.
But it's a big, it's 1 in 10 Americans living in our district, so.
Okay, but we actually have 10 cases.
10 cases that are pending right now within the Los Angeles River watershed.
And how many will you be making decisions on in the near future?
Well, with all the interest, we've been pushing pretty hard with our staff to get some of those done as quickly as possible. I think we're on track to get about half of those done, maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6, as many as 6 within the next week or 2. So we're pretty close to finishing some of those up.
So that'll give us a greater sense of how you're weighing out these cases, what variables you're using,
Yes.
and hopefully give us the policymakers and the administrators and the executive office of the city a greater sense of what direction you're going in.
Right. I think that once we get those out, people will see really in real terms how does this Rapano, the Supreme Court decision that we refer to as the Rapanos case, how does that really affect our jurisdiction under the Clean Water Act?
Okay.
I might mention that several of those pending jurisdictional determinations are on some of the major tributaries, some of the big washes like, Verdugo or Tujunga, and those are what we consider to be relatively permanent waters. And typically those type of water courses, even Justice Scalia would have agreed, are jurisdictional. So those are likely to be jurisdictional. Really where there's a question, where there's more of a question, is further up near the top of the watershed where we have the smallest and driest ephemeral streams. In those situations, we have to go through what we call a significant nexus analysis to decide if there's a significant nexus or a connection between that stream, that small ephemeral stream, in the upper watershed to its nearest downstream traditional navigable water, which is a new concept that we didn't have to use prior to the Rapanos decision.
So does that mean an area like the Glendale Narrows for traditional navigable water designation, there's a chance for that?
Yeah, as Colonel Magnus mentioned at a previous meeting here, at the time he made his decision to include the 2-mile reach at the mouth of the river as well as the 2-mile reach in Sepulveda, he just didn't feel that he had enough information yet to make a decision on the Glendale Narrows. So that's still under consideration. My staff was out there last week collecting data. We're working on that actively.
I just realized I jumped into the questions, but I'm sure you have an update. You want to give us the update, then we're going to ask you more questions after?
Update.
On whatever you might want to be able to share or
Well, in terms of Rapanos and its effect on LA River, I think I've pretty much covered most of that. I had some other topics, just sort of more general topics about the regulatory program. But
Please,
can
just-
I just say, if it's all right,
Yes.
I do understand the difficult position the Army Corps is in since Rapanos, because up to that point, the Army Corps had been extending its jurisdiction quite broadly, and we were all grateful for that protection. So the Rapanos did put them in something of a box. But, our respectful disagreement was over the interpretation of that case and the guidance. But I understand this is the fact that they're looking at the river here is pretty significant, and it's something that's being watched nationally because of its importance in this interpreting that case.
when we talk about making determinations, what can we do to help you move that along in terms of coming to that determination? Is there anything the city can do to facilitate or be supportive?
Well, quite honestly, since most of these determinations, at least so far, if we look at the ones we have pending, most of those are in the major tributaries, which have generally permanently flowing water in them. So they qualify as relatively permanent waters. They're likely to be jurisdictional. it's just a normal process of getting a request from a prospective permit applicant. And they might apply for a permit, but our first step is to decide if we have jurisdiction.
Right.
And if they don't give us good maps and whatnot, we get back with them and have them make sure that they give us a complete package to review. So it's...
But we must, and this was brought up at the last comment period in this committee, a member from the audience brought forth the reality that the rivers in the Southwest behave very differently than rivers throughout the country.
Yes.
And a definition for river in one area might not be the same as here.
Right.
Are we looking at the potential of that criteria in terms of identifying these characteristics that are unique in the Southwest, given the type of topography and climate and the behavior of our watershed? I mean, it's very different than the Everglades, different from the Northwest.
Because of the nature of the Supreme Court's decision, the effect in the arid Southwest is going to be greater than in other parts of the country, because you have Justice Scalia and his 4 folks on his opinion saying we needed a lot of water before we regulate, and you had Justice Kennedy in the middle with his own opinion saying as long as you have a significant nexus to a downstream TNW. So there's a lot of reliance on the quantity of water and how that factors into these jurisdictional determinations. So it is probably more difficult for us in the arid Southwest to apply this Supreme Court decision because all we have is guidance. We don't really have agency regulations that have gone through rulemaking procedures and define some of these terms for us. We have these terms that are not well defined, and we're trying to make sense out of them. So it is difficult, and so we're hopeful that at some point in the future, there's either a legislative, a new legislation that revises the definitions of these terms and makes our life easier, or that we get some sort of regulations, or that we get some sort of guidance that is regionalized, perhaps, for the arid areas. We've regionalized other parts of our program. For example, the wetland delineation manual that we've been using since the 80s has recently, just in the last couple of years, been regionalized so that there's an arid west supplement for that. And there's other, we have another draft field manual that's being developed right now to apply to non-wetland waters, things like stream courses, because in the arid west, we used to not worry about whether anything was regulated. As long as it connected to the ocean, there was no question. What we worried about was how wide, what are the lateral boundaries of our jurisdiction. So we now have a manual that's in development for the arid west to help us define where those boundaries are. So we have a history of regionalizing these kinds of things. There is not an effort underway right now in terms of regionalizing Rapanos, but it would be helpful in the future if we had that.
Where's that done, at the legislation level, administratively, or interpretation?
These kinds of these manuals are usually done within our agency, initiated at our headquarters level.
So we could say, advocate as a city that you treat the Southwest riverways differently from the rest of the United States because of our rain patterns and everything else. And
if we did a resolution, let's say, that identifies criteria with the work of our staff, is that something that would help you, that would help us protect what we think are important watershed areas?
The thing is the Rapanos guidance that we're working from right now was joint guidance with EPA, but it was vetted throughout the administration. So CEQ, OMB, a lot of other entities in the federal government at the national level had a hand in crafting that, the current Rapanos guidance. So I'm not sure that my headquarters, even at this point in time, has the ability to modify or regionalize that as a matter of policy within the administration.
But someone does, yes.
If I might, that's part of what we request by a special case review of the EPA. They're going to, if they agree with us, they will look at the LA River watershed and make a determination. So that might have that effect if it couldn't be done otherwise. I think if I could also suggest, my understanding of reading the guidance, that having evidence of navigation might be helpful. You were asking, Councilmember, about what kind of information we could provide. So I think that...
Yeah, that's true. I mean, as we consider various areas for possible traditional navigable water designations, evidence of historical navigation, particularly any kind of commercial navigation, that's the best evidence that would help us.
But it's my understanding it doesn't have to be a big boat. It could be a canoe. So any type of navigation, a canoe or a kayak, if they're floating down the river, that would work. So if you have photographs or your constituents do, that might be helpful.
We're going to need new transportation controls. Okay. But,
Might be a solution to our transportation problem.
Yes, sir.
No. When I was a child, I'd hear what I thought were the ships coming up the river, but they were the trains in Taylor Yard when I was a little child.
Yeah.
But there are pictures documented of people navigating it by small craft at this point. And I think what the chairman spoke of, whether it's the Sepulveda or the area adjacent to Griffith Park to Elysian Park, it's very potentially possible. And I think it was the federal government of the Corps that said Los Angeles cemented in, and except we're not going to cement it in at the Glendale Narrows because the water table's so high it busts up the concrete. So there's a little bit of culpability around that we could say, hey, everybody could win here.
Well, we tried pretty hard to even go back before the flood control project was constructed to see if there was evidence of historical navigation. We didn't find very much. There were some anecdotal reports generally associated with large flood events when people, in order to get around, needed to float across the river because it was still flowing high. But as a general rule, there really wasn't very much navigation to be documented historically. But if it can be found, if somebody has information that we don't have, we would love to see it.
Yeah.
We asked for that last time. Did any groups contact the city about additional information? Great. Cool. Great.
Just in terms of colleagues, and as we're hearing this discussion, and I'm trying my best to create the kind of flexibility that allows us to be in a partnership as we move forward with all the other challenges that we have, bringing this river back to life. But I'm hoping that the next couple of weeks we'll get a better indicator as to how you're weighing out these cases. And to take over jurisdiction by the EPA, I think will reflect how those cases evolve and the impacts they'll make. So I wanted to see if colleagues, you were amenable to allowing us to provide the next 2 weeks, get the response from the Army Corps, and factor that into your report. So that in your report, there is a way to make observations and recommendations based on the tendencies of what these 4 or 5 cases look like, and will give us a better sense of how we approach the strategy you've been laying out, Commissioner, in terms of what our concerns are and perhaps crafting our language and our policy so that it is leveraging the potential that we have, not only as a city, but as a key player in the whole watershed system within the region. Would you be amenable to that?
Sure, that sounds like a reasonable.
Colleagues, you feel okay about that? So we can wait a couple of weeks. Let's get those results in and factor that into your report so that when you come to the written report phase, we'll get a better understanding of what this means from a technical point of view, from a legal point of view, and from a mechanical point of view as we look at the whole system and its impacts. But I do know that I'm hoping that the CLA will have prepared a resolution supporting our general position of HR 2421, and that's something we can represent as a body, as a city, in regards to the concerns that we have when it comes to these impacts on our watershed. And I think the CLA should be ready by tomorrow.
Sure, we can have that resolution prepared for your office by tomorrow.
Great. Any other questions for our guests and committee, for my colleagues?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, we do have one card, Carolyn Kraft.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your hard work.
Thank you.
Appreciate looking forward working with you. Carolyn Kraft.
Hello.
Hi, welcome.
My name is Carolyn Kraft. I'm here on behalf of Santa Monica Baykeeper and also Heal the Bay. And I heard some great discussion, but we just wanted to reiterate our position which is we're extremely concerned still about the Army Corps of Engineers' decision to declare only 2 sections of the LA River as traditional navigable waters. The Army Corps determination ignores or overlooks the undisputed evidence that the river is currently used for navigation and does not give the appropriate weight to the plans of the future river revitalization, including increased use for boating, canoeing, and kayaking, which the LA City Council has approved. And our most significant concern is that the sections that are not defined as TNWs, traditional navigable waters, it's quite a mouthful, may lose federal protections under the Clean Water Act. In addition, the streams and tributaries connected to the sections of the LA River which are not designated a TNW could also realistically lose Clean Water Act protections. Pollution protections specifically. And without these, there will be an increase in pollution entering the river through upper watershed tributaries and streams. This could jeopardize millions of dollars in bond funds that have gone into restoring the river. This also sets a precedent for other major rivers to lose federal protections in the Southwest region, and development of land that contains creeks, ephemeral streams, and tributaries to the LA River, and destroying natural ecosystems because of development. So we would request that the Army Corps of Engineers designate the entire LA River as a TNW and provide these precious resources the protections it deserves. So as a result, we would ask that the committee make this recommendation, and if the Army Corps of Engineers does not comply, we urge the EPA to use this special case procedure to overturn this determination and ask that this committee and ultimately the City of LA support our request in writing to the EPA as well. So,
Well, thank you very much. Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Kraft. And hoping that this discussion continues to show we're trying to be as proactive as possible with these issues. Anybody here for public comment? Seeing no one, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Amen.
Thanks, Jose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, and